Hey there. June 28th. Yep. That's the time. That's the day. It's Saturday. Yeah, oh my God. Yesterday was huge news. Oh boy. With the Supreme Court ruling it put into question, they didn't decide 100% about what happens when let's say an illegal alien woman who's pregnant the presumption is she's jumped the border, regardless of whether she has any help. You know, she's jumped the border and she's, in the country, gives birth in the country. And then, so what is the legal status of the child, of the baby, the newborn? And they've been going back to, the situation back in 1865. So, that's a while ago. That's, 150 years ago plus. And the purpose in that being written into the Constitution in the amendment, I think it's Amendment 14. Don't hold me to it. I am not a constitutional attorney. But, we have to talk about these things. And the ruling is such, there's our leader, Rush Limbaugh. I had a Rush Limbaugh moment yesterday. Anyway, circling back to the birthright citizenship. The idea was, with that amendment, is that, the offspring of slaves, prenatal, postnatal, a 2-year-old floating around the campus, whatever, they were given, citizenship along with all the other black slaves, that were originally owned. There was a period of time where one human being in the United States could own another. As odd as that sounds. I mean, it's one thing about, owning Fido, your pet dog, and owning, another human being. Anyway, our forefathers, were they were in the agronomic society. They grew things, corn and wheat and, turkeys and chickens and eggs and, they were farmers, basically. They were, industrialists, but farmers, nonetheless. And, it came to pass that, they went over to Africa, and they had these shiploads of black people that were enslaved there, and they brought them over as slaves here, so they could perform agronomic duties, farming duties, for a living, so to speak. In other words, they had a place to live, but they had to do farming. I wouldn't call that a living, but that's the way it was in 1800 and 1820 and 1830 and 40 and 50 and anyway, so in 1860, when they authored, I believe, the 14th Amendment. I could look it up. Oh my gosh, do I have to look it up? Look it up. I have the amendments in here. Charlie Kirk was good enough to send me a copy of the United States Constitution, a pocketed version. Yeah. Yep. The old pocket edition, if you will. And it has all the amendments. 9, 10, 11. I'm getting there. 12, 13. Let's see, what's the 14th? Oh gosh. Now we gotta turn the light on because I can't see what's going on. Yep, that's it. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges, immunities of citizens of the United States. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness without due process of law. All right, well, that's... Yep, so that's right in there in Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. There you go. You can look it up. If you happen to have breakfast, lunch, or dinner with Jimmy, I would supply you with a copy. I have a whole package of them. When I get down to 4 or 5, I order another package. Yeah, it costs about $23 from Amazon to get 24, I believe. This is still pretty packed. Yep, there it is. United States Constitution. Yeah. Anyway. There are a lot of other, pocket editions, but the one that's provided by, published by Charlie Kirk is really, it really fits in the pocket. It's 35 pages. It's 70-something pages, but printed on both sides of the page. That makes it 35, or, under 40, put it that way. There's the flags of every state, State has to have a flag. Remember, we are a federal republic of states. My history teachers of the past are turning in their graves because I know not what I speak. Yeah, really. I don't. I'm a scientist, so what do I know? Very little, but I listen. I listen and learn, and they have a lot of. Fox News is very good about delivering, like Jonathan Turley. He goes on. He's a constitutional expert. Teaches at George Washington University, August University, in our system of universities. Yeah, and he comes on and he explains everything. So it's really quite nice. And he basically says the Trump administration, a lot of the cases that have been challenged through the courts since he's, you have these liberal judges, in the middle of, within, 5 states, 5 liberal states, the judges basically have gotten in the middle of President Trump trying to, I don't speak with any prejudice here. I'm just saying what I hear, and the results of an election are irrefutable, or else for sure the opposing party would have refuted it. They refute everything else, but they didn't refute the election. Guess why? Because Trump apparently won. The official count is in. The certified votes are in. And he won every swing state, and I think 512 electoral votes. You only need 270. He got, 312 electoral votes. Yeah. Which is, PDG. Pretty darn good, as they say. And, he ran. He was very obvious. He's very repetitive. If you don't get what he's stood for, then you have just arrived on the planet from Saturn. Not Uranus, Saturn. Yeah. You got Mars, you got Uranus, you got Saturn. We're not sure about Pluto. It's come to pass that maybe Pluto isn't a planet, even though for 150 years that little tiny ninth thing floating around our solar system, it was a planet. It might be a planet. Right now they're thinking maybe it's a planet. Even after about 5 or 6 years, they thought maybe it wasn't a planet. Anyway, for this conversation, unless you came from Saturn, it is very clear, what Trump stood for, over and over and over again, televised. He went out to 100 different locations, cities and states all over the United States, with rallies with 20, 30, 40, 50, 80, 100,000 people lined up for days to get close. It's pretty dramatic. I haven't seen anything like that. The first time I've seen anything like that was when John F. Kennedy got elected. And he drew crowds like crazy. He didn't draw crowds of 30,000 or 20,000 or 40,000, 50,000, 60,000. It was, you look, the television, the camera swings around and looks over to these states and you go, holy mackerel, how is this possible? Yeah. But he did. So it's clear as a bell. What kinds of things he ran on. And birthright citizenship was one of them, which basically was something circling back to the slaves, which was basically granted by the 14th Amendment, but that was written because of declaring that everybody in the United States are citizens. Everybody, black, white, yellow, purple, whatever, along with their babies, before they were born and after they were born, and during prenatal. Of course, you're not a person until you're born, so far in our world. That's what so there's a 30-day effective date for that, because Trump issued an executive order saying no more. Mustn't do. Some liberal judges said, "Oh no, you can't do that. That's unconstitutional." So that put into question just what's going on here. So that's what that whole mess is about. So there's a 30-day hold period, and then birthright citizenship for all these illegals from all these weird foreign countries, weird or not weird. In other words, you can't jump the border, be illegal, give birth, and all of a sudden the offspring is a citizen. That is coming to an end, apparently. And there's a 30-day grace period, I guess, maybe the wrong word, until that is effective, essentially affirming Trump's executive order. No final opinion is going to be written on that. Apparently in September, October, somewhere in there, when the Supreme Court session reemerges. June, July, I think it's October. So currently, liberal lawyers, which apparently is like all lawyers are liberal. Some are just more liberal than others. So apparently, in the interim period, in the 60 or 90-day period until the Supreme Court enters its session again, a little later in 2025, that's going to be the law of the land. Liberal lawyers are saying, aha, we may have a way around this. Let's file a class action suit nationally. Let's see if we can do that. So maybe that'll, so there's a little tiny sliver of possibility where if class action suits are filed, that maybe, they can have a workaround for this. Well, apparently when they come back into session later this year, they're going to close that loophole up or open it. And the last decision came down 6-3. Where Justice Barrett slammed down Justice Jackson for saying, "Oh yeah, there's only 200 years of of jurisprudence. The Constitution itself, if you just read it." So she didn't much appreciate what was mentioned in the Justice Jackson's dissenting opinion. If something comes before the Supreme Court, now mindful, this is Jimmy speaking, a non-lawyer, Schlemiel that knows nothing much about constitutional law, but what I hear from Jonathan Turley and a few others that tend to say something about these matters. And they're basically saying, that we've been slipping and sliding on what that means for, 20, 30, 40 years, just assuming, that if you're a foreign person, meaning you're not a citizen, and you give birth in the United States, all of a sudden your offspring's a citizen. No. That's not what the original Constitution... That was a very special purpose amendment written for the slaves. Those people didn't come into the United States a few years ago as slaves. They jumped the border and they're illegal. The slaves did not jump the border and were illegal. They were invited in the border by slave owners, which that in theory itself is disgusting. But that's what happened. In the world of freedom, everything was not free. Not back then. But, as a result of the Civil War, and which is a bunch of, the North versus the South and all this business, where 500,000 citizens killed each other, and they finally, not only that, but they killed Lincoln, the president. I mean, there's a lot of killing going on back in the 1860s. Anyway, when the dust settled, they came up with the 14th Amendment, among other things. And that gave everybody that's here, all the slaves are hereby citizens, and all their offspring are citizens. That's what the 14th Amendment did. Briefly. Otherwise, go to jonathanturley.com. Whatever, he's got to have a website. Go to George Washington University. Look up Jonathan Turley. Just type Turley. He's a pretty well-known dude. He's a real plain English. He explains everything in plain English, even though lawyers are trained to be wordsmiths. They say things very particularly to eliminate the exclusionaries, so could be even misleading, if you just apply what's written literally. So lawyers, are what I call wordsmiths. Like a blacksmith. He pounds out pieces of hot iron into shapes like horseshoes and whatever to make them fit the asses around them, meaning the donkeys, of course. Wordsmithing. Think about it. So they're wordsmiths. They very carefully write what what they're writing to, present thoughts that would survive litigation in the courts. So you have to be very careful about what you say. Yep. So you'll have that, and you're gonna be reading about a lot of stuff that came across the tables of justice. Yep. New research tells how Trump got elected. Oh boy, can't wait to read that report. Yeah. Supreme Court lets red states target Planned Parenthood. Yeah, that's another thing that the Supreme Court ruled. Another executive order basically had to do with, I believe, litigation with regard to Medicaid, not Medicare. Although the big, beautiful bill is supposed to be clearing up things about Medicare. That has to do with us, the U.S., inappropriately funding Medicare recipients, or for citizens only, not illegals. So when the liberals say that, oh, yeah, Trump is, eliminating, a lot of benefits under Medicare, it's not true. He's just saying Medicare is for citizens and not all these characters that are jumping the border. No. You're not a citizen. You're not entitled, period. You're not entitled to, all kinds of benefits that, like how about the whole Bill of Rights? That doesn't apply to non-citizens. The liberals say, well, they're entitled to their, No. They're entitled to a hearing in front of a deportation judge. That is the sole scope of, your set of rights. You don't get the Bill of Rights. That's your due process. Liberals trying to expand that into the due process where every single illegal has, the right to be, for a jury and all of that. No. Nice try. Now, you get a chance to go before a deportation judge, and you make your case on why you think your deportation should be stayed. Let's hear it. And of course, they don't come up with valid reasons, so about a truckload, there are now being presently, right now, around the clock, they are being rounded up, and all those that the judge has signed deportation orders, and they're going out of here, wherever from they came or wherever else. And if the country won't take them, they'll dump them somewhere else that will take them. But they're out of here. And if we, if necessary, Trump will threaten the country for not taking back their trash, if you will, meaning they're illegals that have all kinds of, that broke U.S. law, let's just put it that way. They broke U.S. law, they jumped our border, and here is your citizen back again. Take them or else you will not trade with the United States, period. So what's the country say? Okay, we'll take them back. Yeah. El Salvador said, yeah, we got plenty of space for more prisoners. They just built a supposedly state-of-the-art above ground, I believe, El Salvadorian prison that holds 50,000. Well, we can fill that up pretty quick, since we got like 10, 11, 12 million illegals floating around here. So we're going for the worst of the worst first. How about that for a alliteration? An alliteration. How about that? The worst of the first first. The worst of the worst first. However, Holman, who is, in charge of ICE, I believe, he basically says, if we have some people floating around with the worst of the first, then they will be also first. Yeah. And they all, my mother had an expression. I don't know whether she authored it or whether she liked it from someone else. Birds of a feather flock together. That probably came out of a biology book. And what that meant is, the scumbags hang around with scumbags. The horses with striped are called zebras. Zebras hang around with zebras. You know, the birds hang around with birds. The bees hang around with bees. And, scumbags hang around with scumbags. Academians hang around with academians. Scientists tend to hang around with scientists. All things being equal, all other things being equal, which of course is an absurdity in itself because all other things aren't equal. But anyway, you get the point. So over the next few weeks, it's going to be, the constitutional lawyers on both sides of the story are going to be arguing in behalf of their beliefs or their clients' beliefs about what's going to happen with birthright citizenship. Once other final orders are reached regarding, even if there are class action suits filed in the United States about birthright citizenship. And then you got the Planned Parenthood business. So that kind of dips into the Medicaid side of the story. I'm looking at these articles that are popping up on my Flipboard. You see, you can't actually see the F in Flipboard. Can I make that? There you go. You see the F. There you go. Get this. The debris from SpaceX explosions at Boca Chica, Texas, is blowing all kinds of debris over into Mexico. And the president of Mexico said, "I've had enough of this." So they are investigating what they can possibly do about it. So maybe SpaceX is going to have to build a taller wall so that more debris doesn't enter Mexico from Boca Chica, Texas. When that Mars booster rocket takes off with 33 Raptor engines, yeah, whew, it rumbles, baby, I'm told. Yeah, it'll shake your fillings. The energy, the thrust, it's like a constant explosion of liquid methane and liquid oxygen coming together in a state of ignition, producing 300 bar of pressure. And what is 300 bar? Let's look it up on my fancy calculator here. A bar, it's like a European term, a bar is 14.7, there's probably a few decimal points, 14.7 pounds per square inch. Yeah, a bar. So if you got 300 of them, times 300, I bet that's over 4,000 psi. Equals, where's the equal sign? There it is. 44. Wait a minute. That could be. Let's just do it again. Clear. 300 times 14.7 equals. There we go. We had an extra zero in there somehow. 4,400 pounds per square inch of pressure inside the pressure chamber of each Raptor engine. So that's That's 44,000 pounds of pressure expanding in every possible direction. But there's only one direction that it can escape, and that's the nozzle of the Raptor engine. Yeah. So you got 44,000 pounds of pressure going that way. That means you got 44,000 pounds of pressure going up. Assume the nozzle is down. Whoosh. Multiply that by, times 33. So you got 145,000 pounds per square inch of lifting power on the top end of those engines. And that's what gives it the thrust. Yeah. I think I have that right. I know a bar is 14.7 pounds square inch. One bar is 14.7. For example, for all those international customers here, now we fill our tires up. In my Tesla, it says 14.7 times. Let's do that again. 14.7 times 3 equals. Yeah. My Tesla manual, my Tesla friend on Twitter, X, the messenger service, when you get a text message. Well, I have a Twitter friend, a text message friend, who invited us to get a new Tesla about 15 months ago, and that's how we got our new Tesla. And we leased the first one, turned that in, and leased another one right away. Matter of fact, a couple months early. Anyway, looking at my Tesla manual, hearing what I've heard from my messenger thing from Tesla, and reading it on other sources, including what's printed on the side of the tire. Tesla tires are to be inflated to 3 bar. I said, say what? What's a bar? A bar is 1 atmosphere of pressure. 1 atmosphere of pressure is 1 bar. 3 bar is 3 times 14.8, or 44. So I have a little DeWalt portable compressor doodad in a black bag behind me. Small black bag about this big, 12 inches high and 8 inches wide and 4 inches deep. It's in a black bag. And I carry it down to my car every so often to top off the tires so they're inflated to 44 psi. If they're underinflated, the tire runs not flat, but it runs, it's not inflated so the bottom is flat on the road, so it tends to, curve upward. And you essentially run the risk of running the edges of your tire flat before the middle. And you want the entire flat surface. The tire is designed to have a surface that's relatively flat on the road and then comes up on the edges and then seals itself against the inside of the rim of your rim, the metal part of the wheel in a car. So anyway, 3 bar for a Tesla And if you can barely see it here, I can't expand it. I could turn down the brightness now and make it easier, a little easier. There you go, now you can see it if you look carefully. I can put the calculator up here. All right, I'll do that. People are saying, "Come on, do it on the display." All right, we're going to clear this number. 14.7 pounds per square inch times 3 equals 44.1. So they recommend you run the tires at 44 pounds per square inch, aka 3 bar. So what's the tire pressure on my Tesla right now? I can tell you. I have, the Tesla app. There it is. You can see it right there. I think we can see it. Ooh. No. Darn it. Okay. Wow. I'm gonna have to add. I gotta add this. This guy. Now we're getting complicated. All right, let's see if we can fit in the Tesla app here. There we go, Tesla app. There it is. You can see it over on the right-hand portion of your screen. I actually have this iPad Pro, this little skinny device right here, which we're looking at. Because as I wiggle up and down, it's wiggling all on the right side of the screen. Yeah. 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 Now if I go to climate, no, controls. Yeah. It says it's locked. I can touch the button here and it'll flash the headlights. I can honk the horn. I can actually start the car, which just basically wakes it up. But over in the top right corner, you see PSI with like a wheel. I'm going to touch that. And then look at that. It shows the PSI, the pounds per square inch of all 4 tires, left, right, top, bottom. 5 minutes ago, and including up to 17 hours ago, these little devices that are inside the, I think the nozzles. It's in the nozzle of the tire. It is something that reads the pressure inside the tire pressure. And right now I'm running 3 tires. We're at 39 PSI. And see, recommended cold pressure 42. So it's close to 3 bar. Let's check that math again. Let's take, let's go backwards on that. They want 42 PSI. Let's divide that by 3. So they've done a little rounding. They're saying 14 pounds per square inch is the PSI. 3 bar is 3 times that. They left off the 0.7, which got me up to 44 PSI. So 42 PSI. That's what I've been inflating my tires to, by the way. So I'm down about 3 pounds. 1 tire is down about 4 pounds. So I'm going to go down there with my trusty device that pumps air back into. See if I got it behind me here. Here it is. Since you insist, I'll show you. This is a very good automatic, and it's DeWalt, so it's got that brand name, which means industrial strength. Here, I'll just take it out for you. This hose wraps around here, which is detached itself for some reason. Put that back on there. Clip that right on there. And I'll... There it is. No, let's go full screen. Come on, producers, make it easy. Make it easy for me here. Why are you making it so difficult for me? There we go, it's full screen. And here's my DeWalt portable. Now, the nice thing about DeWalt is that it runs on these little batteries, these lithium-ion batteries. 20-volt batteries. Don't drop it. You'll louse up my keyboard. This is 4 ampere hours. It's pretty light. You can push a little thing here, and it shows it's 2/3 full. 1 bar is off. Got 2 lights. Oops, 2 lights instead of 3. Because I used it once. It fits right on this, right on the bottom of this doodad. There you go. Clicks in space. Turn it on with this power switch. The screens light up. You simply dial what pressure you want. On this side, push the button, and the compressor starts to compress. Anyway, so sometime this weekend I'll go down there and pump them up. Since one is at 38, which is below 42, which is 10% under pressure, I think it's time to go back to go down there to, and the Tesla that I turned in 14 months ago, drove it for 3 years. Actually 34 months, because Tesla invited me to turn the car in 2 months early, and they would pay the last 2 payments if I'd take another Tesla. I said, "Well, you want another one of these?" She said, "Sure, I like it." I had to convince her of the first one, but I didn't have to convince her of the second one. Anyway, so that's the reason why I bring that up. Other than letting you know that I've been driving Teslas for 4 years, and about 4 years. As of mid-March, 4 years ago. So now it's April, May, June. Yeah, so 4 years and 3 months. 48, 50, 51 months I've been driving a Tesla. They're mad. I mean, it's the best car I've ever had. You know what my service expense was for the last 4 years? 0. None. How many times I've been into warranty for any warranty claims? 0. None. Nothing breaks. Did I have any? I had $55 I had to pay because there was a pretty serious dent on the driver's side door. I mean, it was a real, someone really dinged me, bam. It was a hard ding, like someone backed into me in a public parking lot somewhere. Anyway, $55 was what Tesla charged me. Because they forgave $500, part of the deal of turning the car in 2 months early. They not only paid off the last 2 months under my 36-month lease as a reward for turning the car in early, because they wanted to schlep me another one. They gave me an extra $500 of excessive wear and tear, they call it. That's just an ancillary mention. But also, you know how when you turn in a lease car, they always ding you for, oh yeah, you don't have enough tread in your tires, you're going to have to replace all 4 tires. Well, that'll set you back, $1,500 if you already didn't change the tires before, so most people that have lease cars, American cars, European cars, doesn't matter what's Mercedes, BMW, they always ding you for a couple of tires. And they try to ding you for all the tires. And on a 30,000 mile lease, chances are you're going to use up the rubber on the tires. But we don't push the accelerator pedal in a turn. We press the accelerator pedal out of the turn, into the turn and out of the turn, but not during the turn. All right? In other words, so if you come off a red light and you're in the turn lane, you accelerate to get yourself moving, and then you let up on the accelerator while you're in the turn, or else you're going to be grinding the edge of the tire into the street. Okay, just imagine. If you're on ice skates. So you push off on your foot, and then you make your turn. And then you change your legs. And then you push again when you're coming out of the turn. You don't accelerate in the turn, or else you're going to, you're going to have a problem on the ice. You can try it. I will not demonstrate it, because I'll slide flat on my tuchus. And if I fall on my tuchus, I'll probably break my tuchus at my advanced age of beauty. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, and I'm sticking to it. So since we don't accelerate in turns, we accelerate to get into the turn, and we accelerate when we're coming out of the turn. But we don't accelerate during the turn. And you know what? That saves a lot of tires. We don't jump off a red light like we're racing for our, livelihood. You're just going from here to there. So relax. Don't be jamming down on that accelerator pedal and throwing your passengers' heads back against the seats every time you come off a red light. Come on. You can only go up to the speed limit, which if you're coming off a red light, what is that going to be? 35 miles an hour? 45 miles an hour? They don't have a red light and then you go 0 to 70. No. I don't know of any streets like that. Let's say the speed limit on the street where there's a red light is, probably 85% of the time is a 35 mile an hour street. Your red light, you go to green, you can only go to 35 miles an hour. You mean to tell me you have to jam down the pedal to go to 0 to 35 in 1.8 seconds? Really? jamming right up against the back end of the car in front of you. I mean, that's a serious waste of energy. E equals mc squared. Remember that? Remember that? Is that Newton's theory? No. It's Einstein's theory. Yeah. E equals mc squared. Well, that creates an equation where there is a relationship between velocity and acceleration and the mass of the vehicle you're dealing with. So, assuming the mass of the car, the weight of the car, if you will, the weight is the force of gravity on the mass, which creates pounds. Pounds of pressure on the straight. Okay. Which is not the pounds we're talking about. But as far as wasting energy, that's what we are talking about. There are two forces. There are at least three physical forces on your ability to either go forward or stay going forward. And that's the friction of your tires on the street. That's the force of friction. And the fact that the rubber is meeting the road. And there is pressure on the rubber because you have your foot on the accelerator pedal full. Well, that force of friction, because you press down on the accelerator pedal and the force is applied to the wheels with a forward motion. Well, that force of that rubber is then interfacing with the pavement on the street or the dirt on the street road. And that's a force of friction. The second force, which is the most obvious force, since we're dealing with wheels, would be the bearings in the wheel itself. Because there is a force of friction because the axle, the drive shaft, the axle, has bearings in it because the weight of the car is on the axle, and therefore those bearings that try to make it easy for that drive shaft to turn with the wheels, there's a force of friction there. Because after all, you got about $1,000 pounds, not dollars, boy. I've been a banker too long. There's about 1,000 pounds on each set of bearings on all four wheels. 4 times 1,000 is 4,000. So for a 4,000 pound car, each wheel has about 1,000 pounds of pressure on it, on the street, on the bearings of the axle. So you've got the force of friction on the bearings, which is a factor, although a smaller factor. And then you got the force of friction on the wheels on the street itself, or the rubber on the street. Buy good tires only, because your life may depend on it. The only difference between you and the street is the tires, actually. What else is on the street? And that's equates to the rubber. So, and the four wheels, which is wheels of rubber, has to do with your steering, your braking, your acceleration, everything goes right through to the wheels on the street or on the sand or whatever you're driving on. Dirt roads. And the third force, which is more obvious to the typical driver, is the force of the coefficient of drag. All right, Jimmy, what is the coefficient of drag? We're learning all kinds of terms here today, folks. I hope it's not too much on a Saturday morning. Okay, but the coefficient of drag is a ratio. It's a number like 4, 3, 2, 1.8, 2.1, 2.3. The higher the number, the worse. You want the lowest possible number. So how do us human beings that just drive these cars, and we're not, aeronautical engineers or deal with wind tunnels and the drag coefficients. Drive 35 miles an hour. We'll keep it simple. And then wind down your window in your car. And then slip your hand out like this. You see how my hand is? It's so that I could be holding some candy in the palm of my hand. Or flip it over this way, like the wing of an airplane. Now turn it. If you have your right hand out the window, because the other guy's driving, okay? So you're a passenger. You're in the front seat. Someone to the left of you is driving the car. Tell that person to get up to 35 miles an hour. Wind down your passenger side window for just 30 seconds. Put your hand out the window. Now turn your hand so that it's palm forward, clockwise. Turn it 90 degrees. So the bottom end of your hand is down and the top end of your hand is up. You'll feel pressure on that hand. It'll try to push your hand backwards. That's the friction. That is the sensation of the air forcing itself on your hand. Assuming there's no wind out there. If you were going 35 miles an hour relative to the street, is the theory of relativity. I'm sorry, we have to bring everything into focus here. So, we're talking about the velocity of your car in relation to the street, which we can assume is not moving. It's on the earth, and it's attached to the earth, and it's not moving. There's no earthquakes. Relative to space, that's a different thing. We'll talk about that later. But so if your car is going 35 miles an hour relative to the street, okay, which is what most GPS velocity meters are going to tell you. And that's how cars measure speed nowadays, the new ones. They have GPS signals, and they measure that GPS signal relative to a satellite that's in a geosynchronous orbit 44,000 miles straight above you. That's how GPS works, by the way, in case you are wondering. Yep, there's a satellite up above the Earth in a geosynchronous orbit, which means it rotates at the same angular velocity as the rotation of the Earth, which goes around once every 24 hours, relative to the sun. I keep on using this relative term. Okay, well, I'm going to circle back to the car on the street, on the pavement. So if a car is going 35 miles an hour relative to the street, and there's a 10 mile an hour wind, headwind, meaning the wind is in hitting the front of the car. So if the car is parked and you got a 10-mile-an-hour wind hitting the front of the car, and you put your hand out the window, you're going to feel that 10-mile-an-hour wind pushing your hand back with a certain amount of pressure. That's the coefficient of drag. Now, if you get the car up to 35 miles an hour, and you got a 10-mile-an-hour headwind, that's what that means, coming into your head, now the pressure on your hand is the equivalent of 45 miles an hour car going in a forward direction where there's no headwind. That's why airplanes always take off into the wind, if possible. They love taking off into headwinds, constant headwinds. And so if you're in an airport with a 20-mile-an-hour headwind, they love that. Yeah. They don't have the planes take off in the opposite direction, because that'd be a tailwind. That means the plane would have to be going 20 miles an hour faster relative to the ground, because after all, it's on the ground, and it's in the beginning of the runway, stopped, waiting for clearance to take off. So let's keep it simple. Let's say the plane is taking off from an airport. I've flown an airplane in my younger days. Didn't get a pilot's license, but my roommate had a pilot's instructor's license, and he taught me how to fly an airplane. Yes, I can actually fly an airplane. I know, it's one of my... No, it's really quite... It's an exciting experience. Taking off is an exciting experience. It is the most dangerous part of flying an airplane. As you may not know, the riskiest part, if you're going to study all the risks associated with flying, and there are many of them, has to do with the aircraft's integrity itself, whether the motor is running or not. Single engine aircraft having, some of the greatest risk. Why is that? Because you have a single engine. If it stops running, you don't have a backup engine. So you got to look for a runway right away if your engine stops. Anyway, so if you're at the end of the runway, if you're at the beginning of the runway, meaning that end of the runway. So if you're at the beginning of the runway and you have a 20-mile-an-hour headwind coming into the airplane, and you'll notice the control tower has a sock. Several points along the runway, there's a sock, which is something that looks like a cone that you'd have on the side of the road, but it's made out of like a nylon material, so air can flow through it. And there's a little red ball on the end of it. And the cone faces in the opposite direction of the wind. So if the wind is blowing from the end of the runway to the beginning of the runway, let's say directly at it, you would see that sock, blowing towards you, where you'd see the red dit on the end of the sock. And that's what you notice when you look up to the control tower as you're getting ready, as you're taxiing around the airport before you get on the takeoff end of the runway. You notice the wind direction. Now, if you have a fully instrument panel in front of you, it'll show you the wind direction. And if you don't know the wind direction, there's also a dial on the screen in front of you, There are a bunch of dials there. And you learn where each one is. There's a test question. Where's the dial on the left? Where's the dial on the right? What's right in front of you? What's up top? Where's the radio? Where's, you got to know where everything is. Because when you look down at your screen, you got to know where everything is, because your eye scans this whole screen. Looks at right the middle and can see actually all the rest of the dials with your peripheral vision. And then you look straight ahead because you don't want to crash into something. So you mostly look straight ahead and you look down at your control panel occasionally. You don't sit there and look at the control panel and read all the instructions. You're supposed to know everything about what's where on the control panel. All right, circling back to the wind in your face when you're at the takeoff end of the runway. So that's the end of the runway that you're at. The point where the plane comes off the taxiway. Then the tower gives you permission to get on the runway, because you don't want to get on the runway if someone else is getting ready to land on the runway. And you always look, regardless of what the tower tells you, because there have been a number of occasions, many, unfortunately, occasions, where pilots have been instructed by the tower to get on the runway when there's someone getting ready to land on top of you. Crash. There have been crashes because inexperienced people in a control tower, either inexperienced or stupid, it's one or the other. You don't instruct an airplane to get on the runway when another air traffic controller has already, let's just say there are two. And then you got a third one looking over the shoulders of the other two. So that means you'd have 3 people. Can you imagine? 3 idiots in a control tower are permitting an airplane to approach a clean runway for takeoff when there's an airplane that's been cleared to land. That is generally the mistake of 3 people. Actually, 4 people. 3 people in a control tower. Or 1 person in a control tower and 2 people napping, picking their noses, talking on a cell phone, or some other. So they're either incompetent or stupid, or both. So that means you got 3 stupid or inattentive people in the control tower, assuming you got to have 3. You don't have to have 3. You could have 1, 2, or 3, at least. Most commercial airports would not have less than 3. 1 controlling landings and 1 controlling takeoffs. And then a supervisor watching both of them. That's like minimum, bare ass minimum. So if you're been directed to get on the runway and you have a 20 mile an hour, circling back to this, you got a 20 mile an hour wind in your face directly. 0 degrees. It's not biased to the left. It's not biased from the right. The wind is coming directly at you, which is 0 degrees relative to the runway. Keep on using this term relative because it's important. So you got a 20 mile an hour wind coming right at your face and you're in an airplane. That's a good thing, because that means if I'm flying in a little airplane that needs 100 miles an hour of forward motion to create enough air over the wings to create the lift which then you take off of the runway. That's what that means, take off of the runway. Yep, that's what a takeoff is. Now, if you don't have a 20-mile-an-hour wind in your face, you have no wind or a slight side wind. We won't get into that later. I was going to say we'll get into that later. No, this is not Aeronautics School 101. No, this is not Aeronautics and Aviation. This is not Aviation School 101. But these are the kind of things you learn in Aviation School 101, as they would say, whoever they is. So, you got a 20-mile-an-hour wind. That means the engine only needs to propel your airplane to 80 miles an hour relative to the runway, because you got 20 miles an hour worth of help from the wind in front of you. So if your takeoff requires a 100-mile-an-hour wind across your wings, straight from the front, you need 100-mile-an-hour worth of airspeed over the wings. And I got a zero wind in front of me. Winds are calm. The sock is down, because you look at the sock for wind direction. There is no wind direction because there's no wind. So the sock is down, meaning that little red ball is as low as it can be because there's no wind in the sock. Then I have to get to 100 miles an hour relative to the runway, which I'll need the maximum amount of runway length in order to lift off the ground. You know, if it's a short runway. Now, if I have a 20-mile-an-hour headwind, then I only need to go 80 miles an hour relative to the runway, because I got 20 miles an hour with the wind helping me, because 80 plus 20 is 100, and that's what I need. I need 100 miles an hour with a wind speed, not ground speed. I need 100 miles an hour with a wind speed on my wings to comfortably take off from the runway. Now these big commercial jets, like 737, 727, 707, 747, that's the big mammoth airplane, the kind that President Trump flies in, 747. Then you got the big twin-engine jets like the 757, the 767, and the 777. I think there is a 787. Trump owns a 757. Has it outfitted with the all kinds of special, leather seating and bathrooms, showers, bedrooms. There's a full, a pretty full galley, for preparing foods. Pretty full behind the galley position for emergency medical treatment. That's 757, which you could buy for $75 million from Boeing. If it's fully outfitted like Trump has it, and clocked that up to about $100 million. So he's probably got $20 million worth of goodies in the airplane. When you buy an aircraft, it comes with a cockpit. You look behind you and there's nothing there, you know. You've got to buy the seats. You've got to buy the toilets. I think there's a couple of toilets in the very back of the airplane. The avionics package. You have an optional avionics package. So then you got to buy all this stuff that equips the cockpit. So when you buy an airplane, it's you get wings, engines, and a cockpit. Okay, and of course you have all kinds of different engine upgrades. Trump has the finest Rolls-Royce engines, according to him and his people of expertise that surround him. On his $100 million 757, he's got 2 of the finest Rolls-Royce engines that money can buy. That's what that means. That's the finest engines money can buy. Of course, money buys all kinds of engines. But when you say it's the finest engines money can buy, that means you buy the finest engines. You kind of reverse the words a little bit, you know. In the English language, we have the privilege of moving some of these modifiers around. So, the finest engines money can buy. What the hell does that mean? That means you swap a couple of words, buy the finest engines. The finest engines money can buy. Just flip a couple of words, and it means the finest engines that are available in the marketplace, and then you use your money to buy them. That's what that means. That's called an idiomatic expression. Idiomatic expression. An expression of idiots. If you're a lawyer, you wouldn't write that. You wouldn't write, I want the finest engines money can buy. You would not write it that way. You would say, you are required to buy the finest engines with money, with our money. Yep, you would change those words around a little bit to make it, because some other smart-ass attorney is going to come behind you in that contract and say, what the hell do you mean by the finest engines money can buy? Money buys all kinds of things. They're not necessarily the finest. What the hell do you mean by that? Then you got to litigate what the hell that means, and how many people think of it this way, and how many people think of it that way. How about writing it so that it's unequivocal? That's a double negative. All wrapped up in one word. Equivocal. What does that mean? Well, it comes out of the Latin, the English word of Latin. Okay. Meaning equal. Equivalence. Equivocal. Meaning one word is the same as another word. They are of equality. So unequivocal means not equivalent. Yeah. So unequivocal means not equivocal. It means it is not capable of being misunderstood. All right. We've talked about air friction and all this kind of stuff. Teslas have, to wrap this up, going back into friction and putting your hand out the window and all that. Teslas have the lowest of, not the lowest, they have of the lowest coefficient of drag that is available today in cars. Meaning that if you have a drag coefficient of 2, that's better than a drag coefficient of 3. My Model Y has a drag coefficient of 2.3. The new Model 2 coming out has a drag coefficient of 2.15. So it has a better drag coefficient, meaning the shape of the car and all the little undulations on the side and on the top and over the windshield. They put it in a wind tunnel and they shape it for the minimum coefficient of drag. I owned a Corvette. The current Corvettes have a drag coefficient of like 3. It looks like a rocket ship, has terrible drag coefficient. Teslas slide through the atmosphere, which with much less friction, which means it has more range with the same amount of energy. All right, I've been on the air for an hour and a half. Marilyn is flagging me down. She came back from her nail appointment. She wants to go have lunch somewhere. It's 11:28. I'm getting hungry, so are you. So I'll see you probably tomorrow early. This was a 10 o'clock session. Tomorrow might be 7. Let's make it 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. I get up at 5, so it gives me plenty of